Trump tried to call the shots, but Carney flipped the whole script. Mark Carney just pushed past Trump's tariff threats like they were nothing. The EU didn't just raise an eyebrow, they were flat out stunned. This wasn't just politics, this was a power move with serious weight. Why did Carney risk it all to break through Trump's bluff? And what does this mean for US trade deals going forward? Word is, behind closed doors, some leaders are calling this the smartest chess move in years, while others are calling it a straight-up betrayal.
The negotiations are at an intense phase. It's a complex negotiation. You see with the various trade deals that have been agreed by other jurisdictions, European Union yesterday, Japan before, Indonesia, etc.
There's been big breaking news. The European Union was caught off guard by a bold action from someone named Carney. He went around President Trump's threats about tariffs. In simple terms, he did something very daring. He avoided Trump's plans to put high taxes, also known as tariffs, on European goods. The way he did it surprised many people in the EU. That's why the news says the EU was shocked.
I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things.
President Trump said he might impose a tariff rate of 15%. That means if goods came from Europe to the US, the United States would add a 15% tax. That would make the goods more expensive for US buyers. The tariff had been discussed for a while. First, people talked about a 10% tariff. Then, after talks with Japan, Trump raised the idea to 15%. That's a big jump because before these threats, tariffs between the US and EU were very low, sometimes only around 1.2%. So, increasing it to 10 or 15% was a huge change. Let's put things into perspective. If something costs $100 to import under a 1.2% tariff, that's only $1.20 extra. But a 15% tariff on the same product would have $15. That is so much higher, it could make products way too expensive. Many companies, especially in Europe, got worried. One company mentioned is Heineken, the beer maker. Heineken said they could manage a 15% tariff. They might accept paying it, but economists says at that level, it would slow down trade. It could change relationships between countries. The US and EU trade over $2 trillion of goods every single year. That's huge, so any change in tariffs can have big economic effects. The European Union is one of the United States' most important trade partners. Nurses, cars, chemicals, machinery, clothing, so many European goods enter the US. They send goods worth billions. If tariffs go up, Europeans lose. The EU wanted to avoid that. They saw Trump's threats as serious, so they acted. They've had many trips and meetings to Washington. European officials went to G7 meetings. They tried hard to avoid a high tariff. They knew how important trade is. If no deal was reached by August 1st, they were ready to fight back. They prepared to place their own tariffs on US goods. They talked about targeting $7 to $10 billion worth of US products with a 30% tariff. That would hit American companies. That made Trump think twice. It showed just how serious the EU was.
Canadian business, for Canadians, is we will only sign a deal that's the right deal, that's a good deal for Canada. We're representing Canada, we're standing up for Canada. The United States and Canada can do many good things together. We have done that in the past, we can do more in the future, but on fair terms for our country.
Carney stepped in with a daring move. He found a way to get around Trump's planned 15% tariff. This bypass meant Europe avoided paying those high taxes. The news says this action averted the tariff. That means preventing it or making it not happen. It was bold because Trump had announced the plan and many thought he would follow through. But Carney's strategy worked. He was able to remove the threat of a 15% tariff. The EU didn't end up paying for it. That's why the EU was shocked. No one expected him to succeed so well. If Carney could stop the tariffs, companies can breathe easier. High tariffs usually mean higher costs. If prices go up, many companies must absorb them or raise prices. Sometimes they can't afford to. That makes trade less profitable. For companies like Heineken, avoiding a 15% tariff means they might stay competitive in the US. But for other smaller companies, failure to stop a tariff could hurt business hard. It could mean laying off workers or raising prices for consumers. This whole situation shows something about Trump's strength in trade deals. On one hand, he got attention worldwide. He demanded changes and threatened tariffs. Many countries responded quickly. That shows he has power. But on the other hand, Carney and the EU pushed back. They prepared to retaliate. Carney's move shows that sometimes the US pressure doesn't succeed. It shows limits to Trump's bargaining. The EU showed they could counteract threats. This outcome may lead other countries to ask, Can I trust the United States in the long term? If tariffs can change so fast, can we rely on them? Many countries may start looking elsewhere for trade partners. They might focus less on the US and more on Asia or building regional deals. It's not just the EU. The same kind of tension exists with other major partners, especially with China. The US and China have raised questions for months. Negotiations continue. They've already had several meetings in places like Stockholm. Right now, talks are still in progress. One big issue is that deadlines keep shifting. They had a deadline of August 12th for an agreement, but it has already been extended. This shows how tricky these talks are. Both sides want time and space to adjust. Big issues include trade goods, technology, oil and gas, and broader economic competition. The talks aren't just about tariffs, but about how China's economy works and what it makes. The US wants fair trade, China wants less pressure. This is a long and complex process. From what we can see, there probably won't be a massive deal anytime soon. Experts expect small steps, maybe an extension of deadlines, incremental progress, and future meetings. They may issue agreements about specific industries, then meet again later. They also expect diplomacy to continue. Officials may get tougher again and again. The hope is to restore communication. That might create trust, but trust is fragile. If something changes, countries may act differently. From all of this, a few key themes emerge. The United States has power in trade talks. Trump used threats of tariffs to try to shape deals. That can be effective when countries react fast when billions of dollars are at stake. But power has limits. Carney's bypass shows that bold action by other leaders can block US tariffs. Retaliation plans can push US negotiators to back down. Trust matters. When countries see abrupt policy changes or threats, they question if they can rely on long-term trade. Some may turn toward other trading partners. Smaller economies feel pressure too. Many nations get caught in this web. They may need to align with bigger powers or shift alliances. The economy can be affected. Tariffs raise costs, slow down trade, and can hurt jobs on both sides. Avoiding big tariffs can help maintain stability. Even though the US has bigger trade influence overall, the European Union responded well. They didn't just sit back. They went to Washington many times. They used G7 meetings. They signaled they were willing to use tariffs themselves. And most importantly, they had a backup plan. They prepared to act if no deal had been reached. This put real pressure on US leaders. That made a huge difference. So in the end, Carney's actions was a result of long work and real preparation. It wasn't magic. It was a carefully planned response that paid off well. This event may change how the US deals with trade in the future. Other countries may stand firm. They may be ready to retaliate quickly. The US might need to follow through with more detailed offers. Trump's team might have to negotiate with more patience and show good faith if they want solid long-term agreements. Sudden threats might backfire if targets push back. If tariffs go up, everyday items can cost more. Things like electronics, cars, clothes, food, all may rise in price. If trade remains stable, prices stay lower. That's good for consumers. Jobs in factories or shipping can be affected. Companies that export goods may hire fewer workers if trade is disrupted. Overall economic growth depends on healthy global trade. Maintaining trust between big partners like the US, EU, China helps economies grow. The original tariff threat was around 10%, later raised to 15%. The baseline tariff rate before that was just about 1.2%. August 1st was the key deadline for the EU deal, and the EU was ready to retaliate if no agreement came. Another important deadline was August 12th in talks with China, though deadlines may keep shifting as talks continue. This is a real turning point in international trade. Carney's bold move surprised the European Union's trading partner, the United States. The 15% tariff threat, which would have raised import costs drastically, was a major concern for many businesses. The EU was thoroughly prepared, ready to retaliate, and ultimately succeeded in stopping the tariff. This shows that while the US has power, strong coordination by other nations can change the game. Trade negotiations are never simple. They involve money, politics, and the economic future of millions. What happens here will shape how countries negotiate in the future. And for ordinary people and businesses, avoiding big tariffs means prices stay lower and trade stays healthier. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like and drop your thoughts in the comments. Catch you in the next one.